The next move will be Madison Square Garden. After that, I'll probably just collapse. I don't know.
Imagine this. It's 1974. For the first time since the Beatles split, one of them is stepping back onto an American stage. Not Lennon, not McCartney, not Ringo. It's George, the quiet Beatle, the one the world saw as wise, spiritual, untouchable. Fans are buzzing with excitement. The press hypes it as history in the making. The first Beatle to return. The first chance to relive the magic. The lights drop. The crowd roars. George walks out, guitar in hand, but then something feels off. His voice, hoarse, strained. Each note cracks. Each word sounds like a battle. His energy, fading. Instead of glowing with confidence, he looks exhausted, almost fragile. And the crowd, silent, confused. They came for nostalgia. They came for Beatles songs. But what they got was different. Broken vocals, lyrics rewritten into strange new lines, and long stretches of Indian classical music they didn't understand. The dream of a triumphant comeback turned into a nightmare. Critics shredded him in reviews. Fans walked out mid-show, and George himself admitted he was collapsing. So what really happened? How did the man who gave us the masterpiece All Things Must Pass, the man who led the groundbreaking concert for Bangladesh, end up nearly destroying his career and himself on the Dark Horse Tour? This is the untold story of George Harrison's fall and how he clawed his way back. When George Harrison walked away from the Beatles, he wasn't just leaving a band. He was breaking out of a prison. For years, his songs had been sidelined. 2 tracks per album. That was the rule. No matter how good, no matter how ready, Lennon and McCartney's voices always came first. But now George was free. And that freedom came out like an explosion. All Things Must Pass. Not just an album, a triple album. Overflowing with music he'd been storing up for years. Songs that had been locked away suddenly poured out all at once. Critics called it a masterpiece. Fans heard something they'd been missing. George, not the quiet Beatle, but an artist finally standing in full light. A giant who'd been underestimated for too long. And then came the concert for Bangladesh. What George did there was revolutionary. The first major benefit concert in rock history. Stadiums weren't just for screaming fans anymore. They could be for saving lives. George proved music could heal, it could unite, it could matter in ways bigger than the charts. By 1973, he looked untouchable. Living in the material world gave him another US #1. The charts loved him, the critics praised him. Fans believed George had found what every rock star was chasing: balance, fame, music, spirituality, all in harmony. But here's the twist. Even at the top, shadows creep in. And behind that image of freedom, George was already on the road to the darkest chapter of his life. November 1974. History in the making. The first Beatle to tour America since the band's breakup. 45 concerts, 26 cities, all in just 6 weeks. On paper, legendary. In reality, a ticking time bomb. George wasn't ready, not even close. He hadn't sung live in years, and just weeks before opening night, laryngitis shredded his voice. Doctors told him to rest. But the show? It had to go on. Tickets were sold. The press was waiting. The machine couldn't stop. So George stepped onto that stage broken, and the cracks showed immediately. His voice, hoarse, ragged, almost unrecognizable. Every song sounded like a struggle. Fans expected the sweet, steady George from Something or Here Comes the Sun. Instead, they got a man fighting for every note. But the voice wasn't the only shock. George refused to give fans the Beatles reunion they were hoping for. Instead of nostalgia, he gave reinvention. Something in the way she moves, rewritten into, if there's something in the way, remove it. While My Guitar Gently Weeps became While My Guitar Tries to Smile. And the most jaw-dropping moment in my life twisted into I Love God More. To George, it was spiritual. To the audience, it felt like betrayal. And just when fans thought they might get a hit-filled rock concert, half the show shifted into Indian classical music. Brilliant. Deep. But for many Western fans in 1974, completely baffling. They didn't understand it. Some booed, others just walked out. George felt the chill from the crowd. At one show in Los Angeles, after a lukewarm reaction, he snapped, "I don't know how it feels down there, but from up here, you seem pretty dead." The critics pounced. The New Yorker labeled the tour an unfortunate experience. Rolling Stone said George sounded like a man on the edge. Fans complained of sermons instead of songs. The verdict was brutal. The spiritual Beatle, the hero of Bangladesh, was suddenly being called preachy, erratic, even lost. What should have been a triumphant comeback became the tour that broke him, and by the final show, George Harrison's reputation and his spirit were in pieces. By the end of 1974, George Harrison was wrecked. His voice, gone. His tour, laughed off by critics. His marriage, over. And his reputation, hanging by a thread. The press mocked him. Fans turned their backs. Even George admitted, "I had no voice, and almost nobody at times." This was George Harrison, the man who soared past the Beatles with All Things Must Pass, the man who saved lives with a concert for Bangladesh. Now he was drinking too much, snorting too much, searching for comfort in all the wrong places. He was lost. And then she appeared. Olivia Arias, not a fan, not a star. A young woman working quietly at his label, Dark Horse Records. At first it was business, but George noticed something. She didn't care about the Beatle. She saw the man, the fragile, wounded man behind the fame. Phone calls turned into late-night conversations. Conversations into laughter. Laughter into connection. And slowly, connection into love. Olivia became his anchor, his safe place in the storm. While the world saw him as broken, she saw someone worth saving. And George admitted later, that's exactly what she did. She saved him. With Olivia by his side, the chaos began to fade. The cocaine binges slowed. The endless pressure eased. George started pulling back from the noise. This wasn't just romance. This was survival. Because without Olivia, George Harrison might never have come back. She gave him stability. She gave him love. And most importantly, she gave him the courage to rebuild. For George, the Dark Horse Tour had been the breaking point. Olivia was the turning point. The moment when his fall stopped and his climb back began. On the surface, the Dark Horse Tour was a disaster. The broken voice, the critics circling, the boos from the audience. A Beatle unraveling in real time. History could have stamped it as George Harrison's greatest failure. But here's the twist. It wasn't just failure. It was a statement. George wasn't chasing nostalgia. He wasn't there to hand out Beatles' greatest hits like souvenirs. He wanted more. He wanted risk. He wanted to fuse East and West on the same stage, to preach spirituality in the middle of a rock concert, to take songs people thought they knew and twist them into something new, something personal. Yes, it was messy. Yes, it confused people. But it was also fearless, because George Harrison showed the world something rock stars almost never show: vulnerability. He was willing to fall flat, to look foolish, to disappoint an entire arena, all for the chance to be authentic. And in doing so, he quietly redefined what it meant to be an artist. The Dark Horse Tour wasn't about perfection. It was about resistance, about saying, I won't be what you demand, I'll be what I am. That's the real legacy, not the cracked notes, Not the bad headlines, but the fact that George Harrison, even at his weakest, had the courage to show us his truth. And in the end, that truth made him more than just a Beatle. It made him human. It made him timeless. It made him George. What many called a disaster was actually a statement. George Harrison wasn't chasing applause. He wasn't chasing nostalgia. He was carving out his own path, even if it meant losing fans along the way. Think about it. At a time when the world wanted another Beatlemania, George gave them honesty, a cracked voice, a fragile heart, a man torn between fame, faith, and freedom. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a strange way, that honesty is what made him a pioneer. Because not every legend is defined by their greatest triumphs. Sometimes, it's the breakdowns that tell the bigger story. So, what do you think? What? Was George's 1974 Dark Horse Tour a total disaster? Or was it an act of courage? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And hey, if you enjoyed this dive into music history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story from the world of celebrity legends. Because trust me, there are plenty more untold stories waiting.